Good morning, guys, and welcome to Dallas Regionals. I'm Regina Angley, Brendan Lewis. Super excited for the first regional of the Moon Series format. We got Z-Moves back, so I'm excited to see some dancing on screen again.
Absolutely. I think that was really something that was missing from the last format, and it's always a true pleasure to be back and doing the first regional of a format. There are a lot of interesting dynamics, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of times where people try and, like, first week, I'm trying to bust the meta, and then there are some people that are just kind of, there's like defaulting back to some of like what's already been very loosely established. So a lot of interesting stuff going on, a lot of really good players, which we're already looking forward to our round one match, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But Regina, just off screen a couple minutes, we were talking about just like really the strength of the field of players that's here today.
There's we've got the returning champion from last year, Cedric Meniere, and then we've got Wolfe here. There's Angel Miranda. Obviously, we got your familiar faces. We've got James. We've got Nails. There's just a lot of people here who you're just like, oh, this is going to be a tough tournament.
Yeah, we have regional champions. We have national champions. We have international champions. We have world champions all partaking in this field today. And that's not to mention even some of the younger players that are just kind of, you're just waiting for their first regional victory that could come at any moment. And it's going to be a really explosive format, I think, with the addition of Z-Moves. But prior to the addition of Megas, which, kind of adds a little bit of a different dynamic. So this is just kind of Sun Series, and then you throw a whole bunch of extra power into it.
You play the guessing game.
You ramp the power up, and that's where we are. We've only had a couple weeks of it. I think there have only been a couple of true events.
Last weekend was definitely one of the few times that we've had events, and I think everybody decided to run it today. I know my home area, like Southern California, is having their first PC today, and I was like, cool, guys, I wanted that to be my first practice for this, but that's not
unfortunately, you're here with us today, Regina.
I love you guys.
But there have been kind of like a minimal amount of results to allow for the format to build on itself so far. And there have been, in a very limited sample size, some pretty interesting statistics as far as things that have won events so far. And, of course, for those of you that have followed the scene, we saw
last week
Jeremy Rodriguez and Ashton Cox really take over the Sun Series with that team that they had with the Xerneas and the Lunala, the Toxicroak, the Incineroar. And they've already started to ramp it up going into Moon Series here, and they were both placed into the top 4 of a PC with Como O. Now that our favorite dragon, our favorite clangy boy, has his Z Crystal back, it looks like he's looking to make an appearance, which is interesting given that the format is dominated by Xerneas.
Right, and I think what's really cool too is that now you've also got the rise of, I think we're going to see a little bit more of like the Tapus get some usage. I think Tapu Koko is going to be really fun in this format, especially the Electrium Z Axis once more. So a lot of Gigavolt Havocs I think we're going to be seeing today, but also the fact is I'm waiting to see how many Z Crystal Lunala we're going to see.
I think it's going to be pretty omnipresent, to be honest with you. So that attack is very, very strong. It's very long also.
45 seconds I think it was clocked in at, which...
Yeah, given how strong Lunala was in Sun Series before you give it an attack that basically doubles the base power of its strongest move, and that Ghost is such a strong attacking type. It hits so many things. It's really strong, and I think that's going to be a very present force in the format and also in the field today. And I think you'll also see Lunala with its Z Crystal even carry into the Ultra Series. I think it's that good.
Well, because I think the fun thing about it is you've got that Shadow Shield, which means you can take a hit at least once and then
blast them back.
Yeah. And there's just so much options.
And Lunala now, of course, not only has one big laser, but multiple converging lasers. So really big buff for Lunala there. And as far as some of the metagame trends, of course, it's really tough to say exactly what's kind of, going on in such an early format. There have been kind of, 3 restricted combos that have started to rise to the top of the tournament. And one of them is the Veltal Groudon combo, which really came on very late in Sun Series, and we saw it win, I believe, the last regional of the format.
Anaheim Regionals!
There you go, Regina, your home regional. Yes. And I believe Ragav Malavia was the winner of the regional there. And that was a team that really established itself even prior to the addition of Z Crystals. And now that you have the opportunity to throw something like, Groundium Groudon, Electrium Tapu Koko, Rockium Stack Attack on there, that really can swing a lot of things in its favor. And I know many players have been outspoken about their affection for that format because of how strong it feels. It's very cohesive.
Yeah. All right, so anyway, we do have our round 1 up for you guys. We have for you guys Wolfe Glick versus Gavin Michaels, so we're just going to go right in there. They are in team preview already, so I guess these are two players who obviously need no like true introduction.
Two of the best
here.
Players in the world over the past decade of VGC, and I don't think it's even really a stretch to say that these are going way back players that have consistently been some of the best in any format.
Yeah.
And their teams are up on stream there, Regina. I'm going to read them off real quick, and I'm going to just pat myself on the back for the foresight. First is that Gavin is running that team that I was just briefly talking about with the Tapu Koko, the Veltal, Groudon, Stack Attack of Venusaur, and Incineroar, which is a powerhouse team. And Wolfe opting to run something that actually not seen so much yet. And this is, as far as Pokemon that will sort of show up for just one format, this is Palkia's format. Because once the Megas start to come back, you won't see it so much. But while it has access to Waltarium, very good. And Wolfe's team, of course, is Palkia, Incineroar, Stack Attack of Kyogre, Serena, and Kartana.
Yeah, and I think Kartana's been a really fun Pokemon to kind of see here. I know that a lot of people were considering bringing it back, especially with Assault Vest. I think having it, like, being able to at least be a fast Pokemon with some sort of Z-Crystal would also help it, because that Bloom Doom, which we saw a lot of back, in 17 and 18, could be really help against Kyogre.
Oh yeah, Bloom Doom super good against Kyogre, and also gives it a bigger chance to knock out Groudon. And of course, we've seen Kartana kind of flip the Incineroar matchup in the past with access to Titanium, and then finally when it did get Tailwind, we saw that Z Tailwind set, which allows it to just constantly be hitting things with critical hits. So really interesting Pokemon. As Pokemon for these trainers will hit the field, Regina.
Yeah, we've got that Yveltal and Venusaur from Gavin, and Wolfe leading with that Incineroar and that Palkia. So right from the get-go, we do have that Intimidate and the Fake Out pressure here from that Incineroar. And we do see that Palkia's pressure goes first before the Dark Aura. And now we've got that Intimidate going into both of Gavin's Pokemon. No speed boost yet for this Venusaur, though, so no Chlorophyll access.
Right, and both players opting to leave their weather in the back, knowing that it is going to be an important dynamic, whether the sun, whether the rain is up on the field. This lead that Gavin selected is very kind of like a catch-all lead for most Kyogre teams. When you don't know if it's Scarf, you don't know exactly what kind of partners are going to throw at you. You get the option to take an attack with what's presumably an Assault Vest Yveltal, and then you also can take a water attack with that Venusaur.
All right, and that Incineroar going for the Fake Out into that Venusaur as Palkia doubles down into it, going to use that Space Run to not just kind of barely miss that knockout there, as we do have a Snarl from that Yveltal going into both Pokemon. Going to lower the special attack. Obviously, more important, I'm pretty sure on that Palkia, obviously, Incineroar not very special attack.
Right, yeah, the only thing that you see Incineroar running as far as a special attack is a Snarl of its own, and that's not really, something that it intends to be doing a lot of damage with. And it looks like Wolfe was probably expecting to take that knockout on Venusaur here, but his position still not too bad. Regardless of the special attack drop onto a Palkia, he's going to be able to knock out that Venusaur no matter what. The one thing I'm watching just for this Venusaur here is you wonder whether or not it has Protect, because a lot of times players have been opting to drop Protect on Venusaur in favor of running Hidden Power Fire in addition to, Grass Knot, Sludge Bomb, and Sleep Powder. And instead, Gavin's going to withdraw it from the field here in favor of his own Incineroar. Pretty safe switch there.
Yeah, so going to make sure he gets his own Intimidate now into Wolfe's Incineroar, but making sure that Venusaur is going to stick around for just a little bit longer for later on, most likely. And now we do have that Protect coming in from that Palkia, so not going to take any damage. Probably didn't want to take a Grass-type move potentially from that Venusaur, as we have another Snarl. Also didn't want to take that second special attack drop from this Yveltal. Is going to go into that Incineroar once more, but now this Incineroar is kind of free to for an attack. Is mostly going to target down that Venusaur from earlier. Does go for a knockoff instead, actually, and goes into that Yveltal and is going to reveal that item that that Gavin has on it, which is going to be that Assault Vest, which is what Yveltal is usually running.
Right, very commonly seen with the Assault Vest, and actually a lot of times these Yveltal with the Assault Vest can be seen running like a special defense boosting nature in order to help him actually take attacks from Xerneas, which is kind of a really interesting way to kind of flip that so you can sit in front of a Geomancy and go Snarl. But in this case, knocking off that Assault Vest is going to be very important for Wolfe's game plan going forward, because Palkia and Kyogre are special attackers, and otherwise it would be really difficult to hit that Yveltal.
Yeah, and Wolfe switching in that Serena for that Palkia just as Gavin does go for that Fake Out, but Quilly Majesty stopping that as another Snarl from this Yveltal going into both those Pokemon is going to get Serena in on the switch, but at least that Palkia has its special attack reset. Is going to be really important for Wolfe later on. We do have that Incineroar on Wolfe's side going for that U-turn, going down into that Yveltal again. Is going to allow Wolfe to pivot a little bit better, so could be bringing back in that Palkia, which has its stats.
Going back into Palkia, yeah.
And we could also be seeing that weather as well. So at least Wolfe has that option to pivot now.
Right, and I think probably what you want to do here is go back into the Palkia, but instead he's going to go with Aaron Trailer Rules here. Love the name, as Kyogre hits the field instead of Palkia. What I was kind of expecting was to go into Palkia and keep that rain in the back, which would give you the option to go for a water attack as you switch to Kyogre, but no, he's going to go right into the Kyogre here and get himself a lot of offensive pressure all of a sudden. He's threatening 2 knockouts right now, but we got to watch out for that Groudon in the back.
Yeah, and I think it becomes sort of a mind game of, like, are you going to switch out that Kyogre to save it, knowing that potentially, like, right now, you know, trying for that fake out, maybe Gavin, like, baiting him into that Groudon, as we now have that Incineroar once more, is going to be getting intimidate into both these Pokemon. So now, Gavin's Incineroar is going to be at -1, and his Yveltal is going to be at -2, but we are going to see a switch in as well on Gavin's side. Is going to be most likely that Groudon.
You would expect that it is
right
the Groudon, right? And there it is. And now, of course, Wolfe will have his own fake out pressure here to prevent Groudon from moving next turn. What the Serena does could be really interesting if Wolfe tries to call that switch into Groudon.
Ooh, and it's got to survive this Oblivion Wing, which it doesn't, though. Does manage to get knocked out here, and it's going to heal that Yveltal for all the damage that it had taken from before, which is going to be a little bit tougher for Wolfe. He is going to have to either bring in that Kyogre or that Palkia again, and we are going to be in the sun unless he decides to bring in that Kyogre to reset the weather once more.
I think this is actually a great position for Kyogre. Now that he's got that Groudon on the field, there's no threat of the sun being switched in, and if this is a Choice Scarf Kyogre, this could be a situation in which Wolfe just takes 2 knockouts here. Now that Yveltal does not have its Assault Vest, a Water Spout is, has Venusaur is in the back and just a little bit of HP. If it switches in, it's going to get knocked out. If Incineroar switches in, it's going to get knocked out. So unfortunately, it looks like Gavin's going to have to choose what exactly he would like to sacrifice to this Water Spout from Kyogre in order to get his Groudon off the field and then back on later in the game.
Yeah, that's a hard call to make, because I think, you're going to save that Groudon because you want to have that weather advantage.
You have to, yeah.
But like you said, I think he might be looking to sacrifice that Venusaur.
I think with the little amount of HP that it has, I think unfortunately that might be the way that he has to go. But nope, it's going to be Incineroar here. The unfortunate sacrificial cat who's going to be thrown into the bathtub. It will get its Intimidate off on the opposing Incineroar, but this was really the position that Wolfe was playing for, and why U-turn Incineroar is so strong.
Yeah, going to actually withdraw his own Incineroar. Is going to send out that Palkia, which is going to benefit, hopefully, if it's got a Water-type move, it's going to benefit from that rain later on. And we are going to see that Water Spout from this Kyogre at full health, with no special attack drops, is going to pick up the knockout on Incineroar, but not on that Yveltal, even after that Assault Vest has been knocked off, which now this Yveltal is able to go for Oblivion once more and get some of that health back that it had lost.
Right, and even without the Assault Vest, Yveltal really flexing its bulk there. You see just how big its base stats are, able to take probably one of the strongest attacks in the format pretty comfortably and retaliate with an Oblivion Wing. In hindsight, you kind of wonder whether or not Gavin might have liked to try and get a little bit of damage down onto that Kyogre to prevent the power of another Water Spout, and a Snarl there would have been able to catch both Palkia and Kyogre, which would have definitely kind of neutered a lot of the damage that Wolfe would have been able to put forward with those 2 water types. And now, of course, Groudon does switch back onto the field, and this is kind of, unfortunately, what Incineroar was sacrificed for, this position. For Gavin here.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, it's so interesting because we still haven't seen a Z move from either of these players, and they've shown all of their Pokemon, obviously, and I'm assuming that obviously that Kyogre isn't going to be a Z move. We did see that Water Spout, and I don't know why you would go for that when you can go for a Z
Scarf
move.
is so good.
That's true, yeah. And so I think it's a little bit tough because, I think you're at that area now where you can use that Z move and have that ability to just really, go for that big damage there. That Kyogre is going to be switched out, and we are going to get that Incineroar once more. So another Intimidate into the Yveltal, which is now at -3.
And it hasn't really been using any physical attacks, so it doesn't really matter too much. It would reduce the damage of something like a knockoff, potentially, but we haven't seen that yet either, as Palkia is going to protect itself. No Snarls here.
Yeah, and Oblivion Wing now from that Yveltal. Going what was that Kyogre would have been great to get that HP down. Does get that Incineroar on the switch in, and now this Groudon, which is at -1, does get intimidated. Is going to be able to at least try to get off a move here. Goes for the Precipice Blades. Doesn't hit the Palkia, obviously, because of that Protect, and does manage to get the Incineroar. And I don't think it's actually going to survive this after taking that chip damage from the Oblivion Wing.
And now Kyogre is going to get to retake the field here. So we've seen two situations in one game here where unfortunately Incineroar has been sacrificed to a Hoenn Legendary in order to get the weather back onto the fields. And this is, again, the offensive position that it looks like Wolfe's team is really based around, is getting that Kyogre onto the field, with the rain up next to Palkia. And of course, he still has his, I'm making a leap here, but really the reason you use Palkia is because it can use Waterium in this format. So, Venusaur is in the back, and it looks like Gavin is probably going to have to just kind of like sack off his Venusaur here to get Groudon back onto the field. But I think a Water Spout plus anything that Palkia wants to do here is going to eventually seal the game up in Wolfe's favor.
Yeah, and like you said, that Venusaur are going to be switched in to be sacrificed to this Kyogre. We do have a Sucker Punch, though, from Yveltal going into that Kyogre, so going to at least try to, negate that damage a little bit.
And there's where the Intimidates matter.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that Venusaur getting knocked out. That Yveltal's still hanging on, though, even with just that little bit of chip damage from HP. But the Spatial Rend is going to be able to pick up the knockout here on that Yveltal, leaving this Groudon, despite bringing back the Sun in. He's going to be going up against a Kyogre at almost full health. And this Palkia, which
presumably still has its Z Crystal active. So it's going to be a tough battle for Groudon, despite getting the opportunity to have its own weather up. It's still going to take a lot of damage, even in the Sun, from that single target Water Spout. But with two water type attackers, regardless of that weather, I think Groudon's gonna fold here eventually.
Yeah, this feels like home right now, where you've got the water types ganging up on the Sun.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like that. And I think really the one out Gavin would be, if he's running a Berry Groudon, what he'd kind of have to do here is take 2 attacks, set up a Swords Dance, eat the berry, and then Precipice Blades for 2 knockouts.
Oh, that's a lot.
It's a lot to ask here, and we'll see how much the Water Spout does.
Yeah, and single target Water Spout.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah. And if it's a Z move, that's just... Oh, it's a substitute, a Wolfe classic. He loves that move. I feel like you see that on most of his teams, and Kyogre's just actually going to go ahead and dodge that Precipice Blades, which will effectively end the game here.
Yeah,
so.
And, doesn't exactly go quite for the strategy that could have helped him win that, but at least that Palkia is staying around to at least guarantee him that win, because if that Kyogre had gotten hit by that Precipice Blades at least, then that Palkia could have been there in the end. So Wolfe just kind of covering all of his bases there.
Right, yeah, it was like a safe way to cover for Groudon going for Protect, scouting the Z move, and it would have punished the passive play, but... instead, he's going to keep his Protect active, get to go for that again, and then again, it looks like Water Spout here is just going to seal the game eventually.
Ooh, no, Gavin actually also going for a Protect here on that. And I think part of this is, like you said, you're trying to fish out to see if there is a Z move there or what's going to be happening.
And it looks like Wolfe is trying his hardest not to reveal it at this point, too. I think that's really what he's going for. But again, you have to expect that it's there, and I don't think there's a reason to use Palkia without its Z move at this point in the format.
Yep. And this Kyogre's Water Spout is going to seal up the game here for Wolfe, as Groudon is going to faint and giving game 1 to Wolfe Glick. But, I mean, Gavin's obviously not out of this yet.
Oh, absolutely not. And I think that Yveltal Groudon combo is pretty well equipped, as long as you are able to effectively manage the weather wars. And that was something that I think Wolfe did way better, using that U-turn Incineroar. Unfortunately, Incineroar was kind of sacrificed to the cause at some point in order to get that weather back up as well. But it's one of those things that allows you to pivot so effectively, and Wolfe did it really well. And with that Scarf Kyogre, one of your main goals with it is to not let it take damage, so you can keep clicking those Water Spouts, and he did that super well with the Incineroar pivoting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that when Moon Series was starting was what Kyogre would be running, and Choice Scarf is still such a good item because it's so hard to stop it from just kind of steamrolling a team if you don't stop it from the get-go. And, we saw Wolfe sort of manage that. He forced Gavin into choices where he had to sacrifice Pokemon in the back.
And that's really what running these kind of like offensive pins is all about, right? Where you can get yourself into a position where, okay, I can click 2 attacks, but can my opponent respond to it? And if my opponent has a way to respond to it, what does he have to give up in order to do so? And Wolfe forced that position twice, where he was like, okay, your Groudon's on the field and the rain is up, so I'm going to knock out whatever comes into that slot. I already did a lot of damage to Venusaur. Incineroar, sorry, Fire-type Cat is not going to take a full power Water Spout, so he had to sacrifice 2 separate Pokemon in order to try and cycle that weather, and Wolfe was still one step ahead in those scenarios. And Gavin's really going to have to try and, I don't know that it necessarily comes down to a change in Pokemon choice, but really just kind of adapt to what Wolfe is doing with those U-turns, and maybe try and mix in a little bit of that of his own if he does go back to his own Incineroar.
And so we're going straight into game 2 here, as we've got Kyogre and Incineroar now as the lead for Wolfe. And we do have the Yveltal coming back in, but we have that Tapu Koko, which is I was hoping to see, because that Tapu Koko deals with a lot on Wolfe's team. I'm hoping he dropped the Venusaur, because that Venusaur
I think you would have, after that game 1, Venusaur would have been the game to drop, absolutely. And kind of interesting, I think you rarely see people try and lead Kyogre directly into a Groudon team, especially if you're running a faster Kyogre, because all it takes is, Groudon in the back, or even Groudon being led into it to lose your weather. So I think more likely what we're going to see here is Kyogre being withdrawn and then Wolfe going for a U-turn. And That allows for a lot of different things, kind of like we saw the pivoting in Game 1. What he could do is just U-turn right back into that Kyogre if he predicts some sort of a Groudon switch, or if if Gavin does bring Groudon in. So there are a lot of options here, but one thing's for sure, Kyogre's not staying on the field.
Yeah, and Kyogre is going to be switched out. Now we are going to be getting in that Serena from before, but we're going to have also that Protect from Tapu Koko. It was slower than that Kyogre, so 100% sure now that Kyogre is Choice Scarf. But Oblivion Wing going to probably go into what does Kyogre. We know it does a lot of damage to Serena.
Oh, that's a good catch.
Yeah, it's a really good prediction, or a really good move choice there from Gavin. That Serena is going to have to be forced to eat its berry. We didn't see a lot of usage from it in that last game, just there to kind of stop that fake out from Gavin's own Incineroar. And like you said, though, that U-turn now from this Incineroar on Wolf's side.
Yeah, and I don't really know. I think you probably aren't going back into Kyogre here because you didn't really. I think that would have been a good option to see if Groudon comes in and then you can U-turn back into Kyogre. But instead, we'll probably see Palkia come back in, or Palkia come in, presuming that is what Wolfe has in the back. Of course, Palkia not a huge fan of Tapu Koko, so it looks like Gavin is kind of responding a little bit better here in the early game. And we know that for Wolfe to really generate the offense that he needs to get going, that Assault Vest needs to be gone. But yeah, it is Kyogre that's going to retake the field, and you have to assume that Incineroar is coming back into that slot. Probably right now.
Yeah, I mean, especially because that Kyogre, now that we know for sure that it is that Choice Scarf, has that ability to just at least deal out as much damage as it can. We do know that Yveltal, even without the Assault Vest, takes that Water Spout so comfortably. And, I don't think that Yveltal is really threatened as much by that Kyogre. You're not worried about that Z move, especially from it.
Right. I think, Serena does have access to Helping Hand, but we saw the amount of damage that a full power Water Spout did after Assault Vest had been knocked off, so the Helping Hand effectively giving it very close to the same boost, and you're not really quite able to get that position where you're taking 2 knockouts. So of course Kyogre is going to have to leave the field. That's really Wolf's offensive win condition there. And Gavin, Yveltal is very difficult to knock out, but he's not generating a lot of offensive pressure in that Wolfe feels scared about switching around.
And we do now finally have that Yveltal switched out, gets that Groudon in, brings in that Sun to overwrite that raid, and now we have our first Z move of Moon Series. It is going to be the Electrium Z Tapu Koko, probably going into, what was that Kyogre. So I think Wolfe playing that game where he's trying his best to bait out certain moves and certain Pokemon. He did get that Groudon out on the field, and so now it's, now you've got that Z move burned. It is going to be on Electric Terrain, so I doubt that this Incineroar is going to be able to survive that, but it's a game of who wants to sacrifice their Incineroar, and I think that we're playing. Oh no, it does survive it. My bad.
So and then a U-turn. So Wolf's going to go for it again here to finish out the turn, and maybe now the Groudon's on the field, get that Kyogre back on, and he's going to be able to threaten a real Water Spout. But I think that was probably a pretty good play by Gavin. It would have been nice if there was a Kyogre sitting there, or nice if a Palkia had switched into that slot. But I think you're pretty comfortable with the damage that you did to Incineroar there, and especially because it's left right outside berry range. Which will give you the opportunity to knock it out instead of letting it get all its health back. And now this is the Kyogre position, and I think maybe that reveal of U-turn on Serena was really something that Wolfe just took a big advantage off of.
Yeah, because now you can fake out and you Water Spout, and there's nothing much that Gavin can really do about it unless he sacrifices something in the back, because Wolfe has the weather advantage now, and you have to preserve this Groudon if you want to try to deal damage to Wolfe's side of the field. I mean, obviously that Tapu Koko already did its job with, it burned that Electric Z, and that's going to make it a hard Pokemon to justify staying around for that Kyogre matchup. Does switch out the Groudon and brings back in that Venusaur, so it can at least take a Water Spout a little bit more comfortably.
Right, and Palkia actually going to retake the fields here in place of that Incineroar, and now we're going to see the Water Spout. It's always interesting to see how much damage it is going to do to that Venusaur, but I think this was actually, with the Venusaur switch and the Protect on Koko, a pretty effective way to mitigate, what could have been a very bad position for Gavin.
Yeah, and that is that Water Spout going to catch that Venusaur in, but does get it to just about half health. So this Venusaur at least is still going to be able to stick around for to at least sacrifice itself to maybe bring in that Groudon. But Tapu Koko did burn its Protect. It is going to be able to at least try to attack that Palkia, depending on how much damage it'll take from that full health Water Spout. So you do also have that option of bringing back in Groudon.
And we're back kind of into this position where it's going to be a lot about trying to figure out what Pokemon is coming in where. You would expect Groudon to be coming in as it is, and it looks like Kyogre is actually going to stay in and just go for the water attacks here because it should have switched out first if it was going to be switching out. So Wolf's just going to keep going for it, maybe trying to catch Gavin not switching his Groudon in, but it's going to take a lot of damage for its troubles here.
Yeah, and now that Tapu Koko is going to be able to at least go for that electric type move, going to go into that Kyogre, obviously boosted by that electric terrain, and that water spout next turn is not going to do any sort of damage, but Spatial Rend is going to be able to pick up the knockout here on that Groudon, which is going to be a huge deal for Wolfe, because now at least he can try to reset that weather later on to help that Palkia now, because this Kyogre is going to have to reset its moves. It was locked into water spout, is going to do absolutely no damage now that it's in the red.
Right, so now that the sun is the center of the sun is gone, of course the sun is up right now, it really gives Wolfe a very clear path to his end game, which just kind of involves getting Kyogre off the field. He can bring in Incineroar, he can bring in Serena. I think you probably bring Incineroar into this position and just kind of allow it to be knocked out. And then you can seal up, any number of different end games, whether or not you want to try and lock into something like Origin Pulse. There's some merit to locking into Thunder or Ice Beam to try and knock out Palkia, or even just Scald. But you can do all of these things off the assumption or the full knowledge that there's not going to be any sun to mess with you once you get back onto the field. So it's really just kind of, I think it's going to be tough for Gavin to dig out of this one, and he might have to play to something like an Origin Pulse in the end game if that's the direction that Wolfe wants to go in.
Yeah, and I think that was really smart of Wolfe, because he didn't switch out that Kyogre. He thought to himself, you know what, I can probably survive this Tapu Koko, and even if I don't, I get damage on that Groudon, and I double down into it. If Gavin keeps that in there, he's losing it, and that's what matters to me right now, because everything else could possibly deal with that Tapu Koko.
Absolutely, and there it goes. Kyogre is going to leave the field in favor of the Incineroar, and it's just kind of a matter of time until, what's going to be knocked out to give that free switch back into Kyogre here.
Yeah, and like you said, it's probably going to be that Incineroar, because it's a little bit of quote-unquote like dead weight right now, as that Thunderbolt once more from that Tapu Koko, again boosted by terrain here, is going to be going into that Incineroar, knocks it out, and does allow Wolfe that kind of switch in next turn. Still, with that Choice Scarf is going to be fastest, and we finally see that Z Crystal from Wolfe is going to be that Palkia, like you said, that Waterium Z. So Hydro Vortex is probably going to get into that Yveltal from that had just come in.
Right, to maybe try and put it into Origin Pulse range, although in the sun and with Assault Vest, if it is going into Veltal. No, he's just going to knock out Tapu Koko instead and force Gavin to, this is definitely going to knock it out even in the sun, and force Gavin to bring his Venusaur back in as Kyogre takes the field. And it's going to be tough. I think Yveltal kind of gives you at least a little bit of a way to try and get back in. If you can maybe dodge an Origin Pulse or something like that, get a couple Snarls off, and then you can kind of Oblivion Wing to stall out the end game. It's still going to be very difficult, especially given that Wolfe does have the Pokemon advantage. He does have that Serena to block Sucker Punch, which is kind of a dynamic that could have played into some of the situations that arise towards the end here. But I think this is still, it feels pretty comfortable for Wolfe, and it's just a matter of, getting the damage off onto the right targets here.
Well, I mean, now that you mentioned Sucker Punch, I mean, now that you have Kyogre on here, it's like, do you switch it out for the Serena and then just allow Palkia to attack and then just save that that Kyogre for later, and then Serena obviously can't be put to sleep, but that Venusaur should, if it has sleep powder, still is able to try to hit those, even in just outside of sun and like not having that speed advantage. But now it's just to be like, it's mind games right here, and it's gonna be really tough to like try to call that.
Yeah, it is mind games, and I think this is still an end game that favors Wolfe slightly, but it's maybe not as overwhelming as it looked at some positions, because Yveltal is just so fat, and it's very difficult to take it down with that Assault Vest. And once you start throwing those Snarls in, it's just a lot to try and take down. It's very bulky. And it looks like, there it is. That was maybe the win condition here, as Yveltal does dodge that Origin Pulse, and it might not even be enough to... Oh, it does
knock out the Venusaur, but missing that Yveltal is going to be so tough right now. I do have the Hydro Pump.
Oh, he hits that, though.
Yeah, so at least he hits one of his Water-type moves here. But still, like, the Origin Pulse double down would have been so nice. However, the Snarl is going to be able to pick up the knockout here. Is going to make sure that that Palkia is at -1, so it is going to hurt that damage output a little bit later on. And that Serena that's in the back, obviously, can't take another Oblivion Wing that we had seen from earlier. However, now it's just a matter of like, can you put out enough damage, and how much will Oblivion Wing bring back for Gavin?
Right, and another thing that I was just thinking about is that Wolfe does have the option to switch off of Hydro Pump onto Spatial Rend, which has the higher critical hit ratio, which would allow him to break through those special attack drops. And potentially be the higher damage option. So he's going to go just straight for the helping hand here. I think Wolfe might need a critical hit and then some Oblivion Wing help as well. The Hydro Pump into Yveltal, he's going to hang on, barring a critical hit. And, of course, the Oblivion Wing allowing him to heal back up off of Serena. This should knock it out. Okay,
Yep,
Regina.
this is not.
It might come down to a
gosh.
critical hit here.
Oh man.
Oh, that's a lot of health.
Yeah, that's gonna be really tough, and like that Yveltal is so bulky, and like you said, that critical hit is gonna matter because that Palkia is at -1. This is
right. He needs a critical hit in order to win this game, and really that Origin Pulse
was oh my gosh,
that's such a tough loss.
All right. Oh no!
Oh, and a Hydro Pump.
Man,
miss.
that is so rough. So we are gonna be going to that game 3.
Gavin. That's tough.
Oh my goodness.
And you know, it's what you opt into when you start to run moves like Origin Pulse, and he had hit all of his spatial Rens, which, you know, technically can miss. So, you know, we're trying to say exactly where the odds, whose favor the odds were in. But Gavin able to take that one off of that Origin Pulse miss, because it seems likely that the combination of Serena and
that helping hand with like the Hydro
right,
Pump.
with the helping hand probably would have been able to take down that Yveltal had it taken a little bit more damage from that Origin Pulse, or any damage from the Origin Pulse, really, just enough to put it into range for those other attacks. And you know, we're back, and I think that's that was really Gavin played to, you know, probably the best shot that he had at taking down this offensive team, which is get that Yveltal into position where it can snarl, and these water type attackers, the amount of, you know, work they can put in is slightly mitigated. And I think he did a good job of that, but really he let Groudon go down early again, and I think that's something, if Gavin can correct that and really get a step ahead of Wolfe with those U-turns and get that Groudon into position, that will change the whole complexion of the match.
Yeah, and I think like Gavin had a good 4 that he brought. Like he adjusted really well with that Tapu Koko. Like it puts a lot of pressure onto Wolfe's team because he's so reliant on that Kyogre and Palkia doing such big damage output, and then having that Serena support. They both locked in for their game 3s, and this is such a tough round 1 to get through.
Oh,
I think
brutal.
Like,
and I think, you know, on the one hand, it's like, wow, I could have gotten a cake for, you know, 2 or 3 rounds and just kind of been sitting nice at 3-0. But on the flip side, you're getting warmed up nice and early. You've got some nice help for your resistance. You know that these 2 players are, you know, really never going to go anything lower than X and 3. So you've got that nice little boost in the back of your head when you play towards that X2 resistance late in the day. Here we go, Regina, game 3. This has turned into a really good set to between these 2 world-class players here in round 1.
Yep, and we've got Wolfe leading now. That Palkia Incineroar. Palkia's pressure going to go first before Groudon's Drought is going to be paired up with that Venusaur on Gavin's side. We do have the Intimidate, though, from Wolfe's Incineroar going into, especially that Groudon, most importantly. But now that Venusaur is finally able to just kind of perform to the best of its ability, has that Chlorophyll boost finally.
It does, and unfortunately, Venusaur is almost definitely going to be subjected to a fake out here, and it's kind of on Gavin to try and kind of adjust. I like this position better than I think most of the lead positions I've seen him in here, and he is going to save that Groudon. I was kind of wondering if he might try to just go for Precipice and let Yveltal play its endgame again after getting that ground type chip damage, but no, he's just going to get that Yveltal in there immediately as Incineroar leaves the field.
Yeah.
And whether or not Venusaur protects is going to be really, really important here.
Yeah, so no fake out there from Incineroar, so is going to rewrite that weather. So again, that weather war super important between these 2 players, that interaction between both Kyogre and Groudon, and that Yveltal coming in.
Oh, he goes straight for the sleep powder.
Yeah, this one does hit it and gets that Kyogre on the switch, which is going to be super tough for Wolfe now to just kind of have that recover from, because that is a sleeping whale on the field now, and it's
a great turn 1 from Gavin so far, but he is going to go, Wolfe is right for that Hydro Vortex, presumably into that Groudon slot. It does a lot of damage even in the sun, and I think he was playing to that switch the water type in and then get that full power Hydro Vortex off. What it does into this Yveltal is going to be really interesting to see.
But you know, even if like, you know, you miss that Groudon, that Yveltal has been such a hard Pokemon to knock out.
It so nicely.
Yeah, but like it's been such a hard Pokemon to knock out for Wolfe that I think that much damage and trying to stop that Oblivion Wind from happening is still going to be really important for him in the long run, because if you can knock out the Yveltal, you don't have to worry about those snarls anymore.
Right. And I think I love to kind of watch, you know, the way that players play evolve over the course of a set. Yeah. And we saw both of these players in game 1. There was a lot of, you know, Incineroar, you know, feeling each other out. And even in game 2, it was a little bit more slow pace where it was like Kyogre on the field, Kyogre off the field. But in this turn 1, both players went right for it. Gavin stayed in with that Venusaur. He was like, you know what, fake me out if you want. I'm going to put something to sleep. And Wolfe was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for a Rain Switch in and a freaking Hydro Vortex into whatever's in that slot. And he gets to the Yveltal with it there and does a lot of damage. And we're off to a running start here in game 3.
Yep, that Kyogre, they're going to go away for now. Does bring back in that Incineroar, so does get a second Intimidate into that Venusaur. Obviously not going to matter much. Does get its first Intimidate into the Yveltal, but more likely that fake out pressure for that that next turn. We do have that Venusaur finally switching out. We have that Groudon coming back in. It's going to be non-intimidated now, so that those Precipice Blades are going to do a lot of damage. Does rewrite the weather here, so that Kyogre sleeping in the back is going to have to come out soon at some point again to try to maybe stop that, as we have a Protect from that Palkia, and we do have this Yveltal kind of free to go for that Oblivion Wing. Is going to go into was that Kyogre kind of, I think, an easy target to go after because, it can't really do anything.
Right.
Does get that Incineroar, though, and gets a critical hit on top of it.
To boot, yeah, to offset some of that damage, and it was a high investment that Wolfe paid to get that Hydro Vortex into the Yveltal slot, so the Oblivion Wing getting off for free is really kind of a nice way to kind of, roll back on that, where it feels good. I took that Hydro Vortex, and now I'm just going to start getting some HP back. And Wolfe's really not in a position to do a whole lot about it either. He's got that fake out pressure now. But the restricted combination on the field for Gavin, he could very easily just go for a Precipice Blades here, or, a Snarl, Precipice Blades Snarl, Precipice Blades Oblivion Wing. He has a lot of options offensively for really, it feels like the first time in the set.
Yeah, and that kind of just shows you why that's such a scary combination to have. As Spatial Ren does manage to connect into that Yveltal.
Takes it so well.
Does not do almost anything to that Yveltal. That Oblivion Wing, I think, is going to be that move that Wolfe is going to hate after this set. Doing that damage and healing up all the damage from that Waterium Z in that first turn. This Yveltal is with this team and it's like, you know what, do whatever you want. I'm just going to take that health from you and heal myself back up. As that Precipice Blades does hit both Pokemon on here, is going to pick up almost a double knockout, does knock out that Incineroar, so those Intimidates later on not going to be able to happen anymore. Does allow Wolfe to possibly switch into that Kyogre, but that Kyogre is still asleep.
I don't think it's even taken a turn of sleep yet either, so he has to find some way to get himself a free turn for just a second to try and at least hope that you can play to the turn 1 wake up at some point. Right now would be a great position to Water Spout in, but unfortunately he can't because it's asleep, and this looks like an opportunity for Gavin to just really keep pressing his advantage. Of course, this is kind of where Palkia has the option. It can knock out Groudon with the Hydro Pump. It can potentially get pretty close to knocking out Yveltal. I don't really recall the roll off the top of my head from game 2, but it's going to be close.
Just that Yveltal has been so hard to knock out. It still has an Assault Vest as well, but I think if you Hydro Pump into that Yveltal, you have to do that before you get knocked out with another Oblivion Wing.
And I think you're almost forced to target Groudon here because it has much more offensive presence, and instead Wolfe is going to continue to try and pivot around here. If he is able to catch a Sucker Punch and get a Hydro Pump into that Groudon slot, that could maybe start to turn things a little bit, but at some point he's going to have to subject Kyogre to an attack so that it can sleep for a turn and then hope to wake up. But he does get the Queenly Majesty in, and he's going to start to roll back at least a little bit
here. Does get the Hydro Pump, though? And if it goes into the Yveltal, and if it goes into the Yveltal, knocks it out. Oh, he gets him back on the Yveltal, I think.
On a critical hit.
Oh, very nice. The critical hit, he could have used that last match.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, the luck's starting to roll back. A lot of things went wrong for Wolfe at the end of game 2, but that critical hit is a nice start for him. As
that Tapu Koko, though, is going to be really tough. Especially,
it's
got that Electrium Z, that Kyogre's in the back sleeping, and it's going to be a really hard Pokemon now to knock out. I mean, it's in such a good position now here to just kind of, take out the rest of Wolfe's team. That Queenly Majesty switching with that Serena was fantastic for him.
But is it enough?
That Tapu Koko now is just going to be like, oh, that's cool, you knocked out Yveltal, but now it's my turn to shine.
Right, yeah, he can go straight for something like a Sludge Bomb plus a Dazzling Gleam, a Sludge Bomb plus an Electrium, activating that Electric Z Crystal. Any combination of attacks. He could even start to switch back into Groudon here on this turn if he wants, but a Z move into that slot will just knock it out.
Yeah, so that Protect now into that Palkia, like you said, the Z move, Ghost to Protect is going to knock out that Palkia. I wonder if he was hoping for that Kyogre switch at any point. Obviously, I think not the most optimal move for Wolfe. At least if that Serena's still around, it can at least try to attack with something like a Power Whip.
Right.
We do know that it has that U-turn as well. Does go into that Palkia, is going to break through that Protect as well and at least do some damage there. It's enough to pick up the knockout on there. And it's going to be tough because until that Kyogre wakes up, there's nothing that Wolfe can really do against this Tapu Koko, especially because now that Serena is taking that Sledge Bomb and is going to be able to eat the berry, still attack, but it took so much damage from that. Not going to be able to stick around for another turn or two.
Right, and I think now Wolfe is in a position where he just really has no way to deal with Venusaur. It's going to be, he has options to get rid of Tapu Koko, and of course there's one. He gets another critical hit.
Yeah.
He gets that critical hit, but still it's going to be, the weather is going to go in favor of Gavin because we know that's a Choice Scarf Kyogre, and Groudon, I believe, it's not Choice Scarf. I'm not sure if we've seen it.
Well, actually, so Groudon comes out first, so the drought's going to, they're hitting the field technically
at the same time.
So it's still going to be tough because yeah, like you said, like that.
So it is going to be Drought here. And now Venusaur, of course, is even faster than that Choice Scarf Kyogre and will have the option to just go straight for a Grass Knot. Serena is still threatening a lot of damage onto Groudon. So there still are some ways that, Wolfe maybe has the opportunity to, maybe if he lives in attack with that Kyogre, which seems unlikely. He'd have to probably dodge the Precipice Blades and a number of combination of things, but he's gotten those 2 critical hits already, so you never know.
So there's a sleep turn at least, so Kyogre could go next. Oh, but goes for that Fire Punch instead into that Serena. Doesn't want to deal with any of that, that Power Whip. And I think Gavin setting himself up, those critical hits helped so much for him later on, but I think at the end it wasn't enough. That first turn of Venusaur hitting that Sleep Powder was what definitely sealed the deal there for Gavin, Right,
and then being able to soak that Hydro Vortex so effectively, he took the attack with the Yveltal and then was able to heal up like close to half the damage that it did. So really well played, and it's so interesting that, after it seemed both players were kind of jockeying for leads in Game 1, Game 2, and then Game 3, Gavin just went hard Sun. He went Groudon, Venusaur, and it seemed like Wolfe was almost not prepared for that. And then, there were, at least ways to play out of that, but Wolfe opted to try and, get one step ahead of Gavin by not faking out the Venusaur and was really punished for it, and Kyogre just slept the whole match. It wasn't even able to get its first turn of sleep off until the last turn of the game.
Yeah, and it's just, that's such a tough thing to call, I think, especially because once you saw in games 1 and 2, that Yveltal just took hits like crazy, even after that Assault Vessel was knocked off.
So thick.
Yeah, it just sat there and was like, you know what, do whatever you want. I'm going to Oblivion Wing and get that health back, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there was so much resources that you had to divert, like, as Wolfe, to get that Yveltal knocked out. And then that Tapu Koko came in and was like, all right, cool, I'll be here, knock out that Palkia. And yeah, I go down to a Power Whip, but there's there's not much you can do after that.
It's just so big, and you kind of forget that, we saw in Sun Series where Yveltal was being used a lot early on as that offensive Black Glasses attacker, and it wasn't really difficult to knock it off the field. It was just a very strong offensive presence. And this is really just like kind of the opposite use of the Pokemon, right? You give it a defensive item, you give it a lot of, bulk as far as how you train the Pokemon, and it's just really, it's like, it's totally different Pokemon the way that it's being played, and it's so difficult to knock out. And I think Gavin played it really well. Wolfe had a game plan where, he knocked off the Assault Vest in Game 1, and that was how he was going to generate enough offense to get through that AV Yveltal. But Gavin able to play around it the rest of the time, and I don't think Yveltal was knocked out in Game 2 or 3,
it was Game 3 was
Game 3 with the critical hit.
The first time it was knocked out in this match. But we will have Gavin back here for just a quick player interview, so we can, at least get some insight into
Great round 1.
Oh man, that was I'm stressed out after that round 1. I can only imagine how they're feeling right now. But don't go anywhere, guys. We will have Gavin back here in just a minute.